Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of That's Initiative. I'm your host Kris, and joining me as always, my co-host Greg. Hey Greg.
Hello everyone. Hello Kris.
Yeah. So this week we're going to look at some listener questions we had submitted. We've been asking for them for the last 5 episodes, so we finally had enough to do a show and see what you guys wanted to hear about. So we'll jump right into it, and we're going to go with a nautical theme. Quite a few variations on this question, but basically wanting to know about nautical theme, running a campaign about pirates and piracy and ship-based combats and all of that stuff. So do you want to pick an element to talk about first, and we can come back around?
Yeah, I think it's obviously super popular at the moment because of Ghost of Saltmarsh, which is sort of the quintessential, iconic, early, U1, 2, 3 modules. There is a portion of it based around the ship, and I think it's an interesting sort of setting. I noticed I was reading through my new copy of Strongholds and Followers by Matt Colville, and he included as one of the strongholds a ship. So I mean, that I think is the way you think about it, is that you're giving the players like a keep or something like that, and that is their sort of base of operations. And the thing, I think it's obviously more work for the game master because it's more fluid and travel based. So you're not just, you may just stay in a port and sail out of that port and then come back and have your adventures and stuff like that. But odds are on at any point that the players could just up and decide they're going to go somewhere that you have not prepared for.
Circumnavigate the Earth.
That's right. The Vasco da Gama action, right? So, yeah, I think that, but as far as the setting goes, I think it's awesome. I mean, I grew up reading Conan, especially the Marvel comic books. And my favorite period of those comic books was Belay, the Black Queen, the pirate Conan and stuff like that. And yeah, that was awesome. They got into all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, we had Sinbad the Sailor when I was growing up, and all the different things. And there's so many things to pull from now. You've got obviously the massively popular Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. A lot of the different things in popular culture you can pull from. I've got a really strong feel from the Critical Role campaign. I think about a 10 episode block from episode mid-30s to mid-40s was pretty strongly nautical themed in their second campaign, and that had a really strong Cthulhu theme to it, with an ancient god that they're trying to awake from the sea type thing, and lots of different, popular mythos stuff you can pull from.
I think one of the really interesting aspects is it is a game that the players are going to tend not to be heroes.
Yeah, it's very easy to plonk, that vessel seems to be filled with gold.
That's right. They've got a getaway car. It's like playing Traveler, where, it all starts out with the best of intentions, but you give them weapons and powered armor and a spaceship and it's on, right? So I think that's something if you were an inexperienced game master and you thought, hey, this would be really good, you might be caught off guard by the behavior of your players. You're like, hey, the last game we played, you guys were all saving villagers and doing all this stuff, and now you're just a bunch of dirty pirates.
I think a good way around that kind of thing would be to start off if you're going to put them on a boat, give them a reason to be on the boat. You're going from point A to point B. A good example would be one of the old Warhammer games I played in. You're heading from the old world to Lustria. So you're trying to avoid some Dark Elf Corsairs, and you run away from the High Elves and they intercept you, and then you get to the zombie coast and you get to Lustria. And then you get some adventures in the new world, and you get to go back and have all your riches, and it's all awesome. But you had a reason to be going from point A to point B. You weren't just given a boat and said, have at it. So,
I mean, the solution to the whole pirate thing is to have the players be part of a crew.
Yeah.
Where they're not the ones who are deciding the meta, the sort of big picture thing. They've got someone that they're answering to. They're the away team, right? They do boarding actions. And so you can set the pace of the story, and you make them the officers, like sort of the master and commander situation where, they get to sit with the captain, and the captain's like, hey, these are our options. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Like whatever. And the players get their input so they don't feel like they're just in a linear railroad game. But ultimately, they don't have free reign, to like unleash their shenanigans upon your world.
Yeah, it's kind of similar feel to the old Dark Heresy, a 40k role-playing campaign, where in the original setting you played an Inquisitor's Warband, so you gave them the campaign by playing as the Inquisitor. You task them and give them general direction, and then it was open world once they got to that planet and had to do investigations and stuff, and they could do their own things there. But if you give them the power to, they've got their hand on the Exterminatus button, it's really easy to go, oh, there's heretics on that planet, planet's dead. Planet's dead. Oh, how many Exterminatus torpedoes do I have? And,
right.
Your sessions end really quickly.
Right. And I mean, that's just something that I think as a game master, you need, before you set it in, put your game in that setting, that you either have to, like talk to the players, and sort of see, what they would like to do. And that is the upside. It's a topic we've sort of broached in the past, but the upside of campaign proposals, where you put a couple of proposals together, right? And you talk with the players, and you're like, there's this one, there's this one, there's this one. What do you guys feel about them? And they're like, oh, this would be kind of cool, and it's more collaborative. And then you go through and you generate the content, right? So you have an idea of kind of what the players are going to be driven by. But ultimately, same thing again. You don't know when you give the players that sort of fluidity, it can go off track really quickly. So you just to be cautious. It'll still be hugely fun, but you'll spend a lot of time improvising, and they'll spend a lot of time evading your encounters, like things that you've planned, because they have a flying mount, so to speak. So why do they need to go through all the things to get to the objective when they can just like jump over top, right?
Yeah. And I know another thing you can do if you are running that kind of game, or you want to buy yourself time where it's easy to have people ambush on the road and things like that. So you can start trying to think about other concerns that they might have. So has the water gone bad? Have they run out of certain food supplies? So you get to, they've got to pick a direction, sail in that direction, try and find an island, do the navigating stuff, and you can give them little bits and pieces like that. So not every encounter has to be the Kraken attacking or the Black Pearl coming for them. It's like the old cliche encounters you'd think of if you were running a sea-based campaign. It can be as simple as them going to an island and getting attacked by saltwater crocodiles, stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think obviously a lot of inspiration in this genre is going to come from movies, television, Black Sails. So the one that I saw, not recently, but in the past, was the sort of, it's kind of almost a biopic. I should actually look it up, but it's the Herman Melville Moby Dick with Chris Hemsworth and Tom Holland and stuff like that. And they're whalers, and they set out, and they're looking for whales and stuff like that. And then they get, much to their, it's their fault, but they get caught in a storm and the ship gets damaged. And so then now they have decided, we're going to go back, or they, going to do this. And then they're conflicted. And then sort of the game master in the movie keeps, just as they want to turn around, they find some whales. And so they follow the whales, they end up that type of sort of hook storytelling works kind of really interesting in that thing. But you're right. Yeah. You want to just, it gives you the opportunity. The reason why you're picking an alternative genre is it gives you opportunity to investigate other avenues of adventure other than beating up things on the road and going and rooting through dungeons and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and you can still give them the dungeons, and it's just a different type. So you'd have the temple on an island, kind of, the Tomb Raider style dungeon thing.
Yeah.
Then,
In the Heart of the Sea. That was the movie that I was thinking of. This is like Ron Howard was directed it, and it's an interesting take. I mean, so I think if you were going to do something like this, you were going to run some sort of nautical thing, doing your due diligence, your background, watching movies of this sort of, I will give you inspiration and give you a lot of plot hooks and stuff like that. I think that inevitably is part of any prep as a game master before you're going to start something like this, right? You want to sort of get a feel, and these type of things are excellent source material.
Yeah. I did want to touch on, before we move on to the next question, just a warning against the Kraken encounter, or the broadside on cannonade exchange kind of encounter. Because if you have that in the middle of the ocean, you're kind of forcing there is no retreating from that encounter. And we've discussed in the past that players don't retreat anyway, so it's probably not an issue.
Right.
But you really need to have your outs lined up in case stuff goes wrong in that encounter. They're fun to do, but beware.
Yeah, so that you pick those encounters as the game master when you want to change the direction of your game. When you want the players to lose, but it may not be blatant. The players, of course, like you just said, always think they're going to win, right? So you give them this sort of apocalyptic encounter that their ship gets wrecked, they end up shipwrecked, they end up on an island, and now the campaign goes in a different direction. They get picked up by a passing merchant vessel and dropped off somewhere where they have no idea, and now your campaign is going in a different direction. So yes, that is the ghost pirate ship / running into the Royal Navy / Grand Kraken. That's the turning point encounter when you want to change the direction your game is going.
Yeah. So I suppose nautical theme kind of rolls directly into the next question, which was like running themed campaigns. And I think we kind of touched on this when we talked about party composition. But he asks about like running all pirates and how you do that, or all rogues and doing the Thieves Guild and that kind of thing. So how would you kind of structure a themed campaign?
Well, so, I mean, something we just pointed out, we did it with Traveller. We put them on a warship, but they had to answer to someone. So they had a certain amount of authority, right? So you could have them as a troop of thieves in a thieves guild, but they have to answer to the guild master, right? Anytime you give them, like you said, that button, that sort of, where they don't have to answer to anybody. There's no accountability. That's where things tend to get out of control a little bit, right? So ultimately, you always want to put them within a structure. And I mean, that, like, the Thieves Guild is an awesome idea. Part of it, there's a political aspect. They have opposing members of the guild that they're competing with for status. They have maybe an adversarial relationship at the beginning with the guildmaster, and they have to change it. Maybe they sell the Thieves Guild out in hopes of like starting their own Thieves Guild. So, I mean, there's lots of alternatives, but when you pick a sort of a themed game like that, you're opening up a sort of a different composition for how the game is going to run.
Yeah. I definitely think those kind of campaigns really need that proposition at the start, that everyone has to be on board with it before you start off. That would be point number one for me. I would never run that style of game without having buy-in from the players before we started.
You mean like we're all going to make dwarves, but somebody makes a halfling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know we spoke about it in the past where you can have... we'll keep a Thief Guild example rolling. It doesn't matter what classes you all pick. Even if one of you's a paladin, I suppose it gets a little bit tricky. But you can have every class and you can fit them into a Thieves Guild and say, okay, you're all in a Thieves Guild now. But
yeah, I think it's a mistake to think that everybody in a Thieves Guild is going to be a thief.
Yeah.
Right? There's going to be fighters. There's going to be wizards. There's no reason why you couldn't have some sort of like a bard, maybe more than a cleric. But, there's like clerics of the luck. If you have like a luck god or, maybe some sort of non-good, sort of more neutral oriented god. There's no reason why you couldn't have a cleric or something like that in there.
Yeah, and I think it can fit perfectly well, but it can kind of put a stumbling blocks on players' ideas for a character if you throw them into this setting with like the buy-in before you've started. So that's why I definitely think
you have to propose it. Yeah, for sure. Right. You have to propose it. They have to accept it. And I think it's not unreasonable for the game master in the proposition to set out restrictions. We're not going to have these races, or we're not going to have these classes, or, having like a wood elf druid in the Thieves Guild is probably, if the player came to you and said, hey, this is my proposition, my dude, something happened and my clan got exterminated. And if he wants to put it forward, then sure. But you are wanting to.
Well, I think a good example would be if we're going to play in a Thieves Guild, you're not allowed to play a lawful good paladin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're not doing this. I'm not starting out the game with this wall in front of us as a group. But that's where I'd start off with a theme campaign. Point number 1 would be, if you want to run it or if you want to play in it, just type up a little proposition for it. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be a full page A4. Just get some bullet points out there. This is what I want to do, and this is the kind of thing we're going to start off with. And the story can evolve and go where the players want to take it once you've started. But I think definitely try and get buy-in before you start for that.
And if that is an idea that you want to pursue, there's lots of like older material, like Game Wars did a whole series in the 80s of like 10 modules, like books about just being a thieves in this like legendary city of Hat Haven. And there's all sorts of content like that. There's also like Evil Hat makes a game called Blades in the Dark, where that is exactly the premise, right? You're a bunch of scoundrels like seeking your fortune on the like haunted streets of this like sort of, it's a Victorian type city, like an industrial fantasy city, but still like that type of thing. You could definitely scan that type of material for inspiration and so forth. Because once again, when you pick a themed game, right, we're opening up different avenues. It's not going to be your conventional game. I think you're not wasting, but I don't even know how to articulate it right. But like if you want to run this themed game, you should make it different.
Yeah.
If you're just going to have a Thieves Guild game that's going to be like your regular game, then why are you making them in the Thieves Guild, right?
Yeah, it comes down to those normal kind of anything where you have restrictions. You should have those restrictions for a reason that further another goal. I think a good one that just springs to mind, because I ran an event for it recently, would be like Infinity, the war game, like the miniatures game there. You have a full, if you want to play Pan-Oceania, you can take any model in Pan-Oceania. If you want to play one of the sectorial lists, you get restrictions. You can only take models from that planet, but you can take more of them and they can form fire teams. So you restrict your options, but you get these benefits. And I think you need to lean into that kind of planning and style that if you're going to, we'll keep the Thieves Guild thing rolling. If you're going to play a Thieves Guild, okay, you can't play a paladin. Maybe you don't want people playing elves for some reason, or maybe orcs. You don't want them playing orcs because orcs struggle to run around the human city.
Sure. You're trying to be inconspicuous. Yeah. Orcs and elves and dwarves and like not humans. Yeah. And, sort of the classes that you would, consider excluding and stuff like that. Yeah, they just make you conspicuous, and that's what you're trying to avoid.
But then the payoff from that might be that, you're going to have access to the Thieves Guild's armory. They've got all of these potions and spells, and you're going to have all this support, and you're always going to have access to jobs that are going to be able to make you a lot of money. So you take away those concerns. That's the benefit of playing in this campaign, is you're going to have access to all of this stuff all the time from low level, but you have to gear yourself into playing in this game. So
it's great because it makes your players perceive the nature of your game in a different manner, right? Yeah. So that ultimately is an awesome experience, because they can't help but grow from being exposed to a different angle of the game. And then when you go to run your next game, then they're just building up their repertoire, because it's unreasonable to say as a role player that you are not evolving.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a difference between the person who comes and sits down at the table for the first time and the person who's been doing it for 40 years. It doesn't mean that the 40-year guy is better, but he certainly has more to draw on, and he is experienced more, and is, I would say, feels less limited by the rules. He realizes that he can suggest things outside the normal scope of things, and the game master will have to interpret how the interaction goes. Whereas this is something we've pointed out in the past with 5e. 5e frames what your character can do, and so newer players feel like they're boxed in, right? All these things are defined what they can do. So if it's not defined what I can do, then I probably can't do it, right? Whereas the more experienced player will look outside the box more often.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, so have you got any good ideas for source material for something like that? We spoke about, obviously, different things to pull from for a nautical theme. So do you have any source material you'd advise for Thieves Guild type stuff?
Well, there's tons of awesome fiction. Fritz Lieber's Fafford and the Grey Mouser, the Lankmar books, amazing, right? They were one of them. They're probably the books that caused the Rogue to be in Dungeons and Dragons. In the 70s, that's the defining book for that type of thing, right? City-based game, just really excellent. Like I said, there's the old Game Lord stuff. You probably can find it on Drive-Thru RPG or stuff like that, PDFs of it. There's just so much material. They have a setting that the entire city is laid out. Yeah. So, there's, lots of different missions. They give you inspiration for assassinations and political interplay and things between different temples. And just all sorts of material like that.
Yeah, I think I'll throw in the Remini Feast stuff. Obviously, he developed his own world from playing D&D, and the Mockers and Krondor and all of that Jimmy Hand stuff is all really good things to pull from. Lots of different adventures involving rival guilds and different things you can just plunder from that world if you read a couple of those books.
Oh no, yeah. That's his stuff is excellent, right? And pretty influential too. I think a lot of the old, if you played with older players, a lot of older players are influenced by that sort of selection process for your character. Where your character gets picked to be this or that and stuff like that. That's a very common theme amongst older game masters.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we had a question for crafting a villain. How do you craft a good villain? Or an evil villain. A believable villain.
A believable villain. Well, so this is interesting because this is an actual conversation that I had on the MCDM Discord maybe 2 weeks ago, where the person was talking about, how do you play... they built this villain, and they decide he was going to be neutral evil. And I said, well, so there, in my opinion, that's your first mistake, right? You don't want to label it with like an alignment or something like that. You want to outline what does your villain want, right? And like what resources he has to go about getting it. And then just play it logically, right? Play it like it was your character. That, if I found myself in this situation, how would I go about getting what I wanted with these resources at hand? And realize, and then I think you've probably experienced this. We've all experienced this suicidal person who's willing to throw their life away to like achieve their goals, right? Where the players are like, why didn't the guy just run away? Like, so be smart about your villain, like unless your villain is a dummy, right? And make it cool, right? Make the players envious of what the villain brings to bear. Like one of the things that this is old, this sort of dates me, but so Dragonlance, which is like, I don't know, coming up on 30 some years now, was like the first iconic big storyline D&D campaign. And there's dragon armies of each of the different colors. And the leader of the red dragon army, so the most powerful dragon army, is like this 8th level hobgoblin dude who's just an idiot, right? So how did he end up in charge? Like, how do the dragons actually work for him? The Black Dragon Army, which at the time in that version of D&D was probably one of the weaker ones, is like got some 21st level, like Salahadin type dude leading the army. But no, we got this 8th level, like hobgoblin, Viewmaster Toad guy that's like in charge. So, make your villain cool, make your villain smart, and the one thing that I love to do with mine is give them lots of pawns so that they rarely, until you're ready for the players to resolve your villain.
Get Vorpal sorted.
To get Vorpal sorted. Yeah. You don't want to put them in the line of fire. So they're going to push their pawns forward, right? And the players, lots of times the players are all like, we got them this time, we got this villain, we got them surrounded, but the villain had a plan because they're not dumb and they prioritize their survival. As if you reverse the roles and it was your character and you were, trying to do this, you would have contingencies in place, right? So the smarter, and yes, as a game master, you control all the options. Yeah. So if the players do outsmart your plan, let it pay off for them, right? That's what I would say. Because otherwise they're just all like, well, it doesn't really matter because we're never, this person is always going to escape or whatever. But if the players like set a trap and you think about it and you're like, this is exceptionally well set out, we'll just play it out and see how it goes. And if your villain ends up getting bamboozled by the players, then, kudos to your players because that's awesome, right? So I wouldn't, use the mighty ruler of annihilation and, bring the hammer down on the players and just have your dude just like, poof and they escape. You want to torment them where the players, if they have just a sort of an average plan, the guy's contingency plan works and he escapes and they're like, no, right? But I think if the players just like totally think it out, right? But how would they know? Until they've had numerous encounters with this guy or woman, right? How would they know what they're capable of? So for sure the player's going to underestimate them, right? Like with you guys in the Night Hag. You guys were fighting thinking you were going to kill it. She's fighting knowing she's trying to judge at the point at which she needs to go ethereal and escape the combat. So, I just picked a threshold, and when she got below that threshold, the first opportunity she got, she ran away, right? To haunt you another day. I mean, that is the sort of quintessential, and now she's more aware of what you're capable of, so she's going to be so much more cautious, unless she's just like this maniacal sociopath, right? But she's going to be more cautious in her interactions with you because she realizes that, hey, you guys are just going to, if she like gets into an encounter that favors your style of play, you guys are just going to beat her up, right?
I would give one bit of advice. If you have a goblin and all of his tribe gets killed and then he flees through the toxic fungus infested tunnels and the players start trying to crawl after them, just to poison the player. Because sometimes you need that solid wall that the players can't get to. So when you did it and the hag just vanished, there was no way we were going to track her down. No, I did it and a goblin ran through some little scurrying tunnels, and you and Daniel were trying to follow him down the tunnels. It's like, okay, well, you see all of this fungus and you disturb it and all these spores come out. It's like, all right, okay, well, we'll push on a bit further. It's like, okay, it's probably going to be bad for you. You can't have subtle warnings that the villain has escaped. You just...
Well, yeah, the tunnel has to get to the point where you can't fit through it. It's a goblin-sized hole, not an elf or a priest of Sigmar-sized hole, and they can't get through, right? Because sometimes, you were right, the players are incredibly dense, and they're like, well, this goes to the whole idea that the players feel like if it's there, you have a plan for them to succeed, right? So as long as you're letting them think that they can catch this goblin, they keep chasing the goblin. The moment that you shut it down and make them have to make alternative choices, the blinders suddenly come off and they become aware, oh, maybe, we were not going to get the guy this time, right?
No, I already accepted that I had an NPC with you, so I should have just started making you start making constitution checks, and you guys just go unconscious and he carries you back to a gunpowder shop and you're all okay in the end. Right. Is how I should have done it, rather than relying on you guys making good decisions.
Yeah, but even funnier if, we get knocked unconscious by the spores while the dwarf is trying to recover us. The little goblin runs back and steals something, steals the priest of Sigmar's holy symbol and then runs off. And when he wakes up, he's like, where'd my holy symbol go? I don't know. I saw this little green dude rooting around in your body.
Right? I would have taken your elf ball. That's what I would have done.
That's right.
That goddamn elf ball.
So if the players want to be that way, and then, because ultimately, I think as the game master, you're cultivating your players to play in your game. So they have to learn your signals and stuff like that, and you have to sometimes illustrate to them that there's consequences there, that they don't just get a free ride when they do stupid things, right? That, and you don't want to punish them.
Yeah, it's not being arbitrary about it.
That's right. And then the next time the situation presents itself, they're like, maybe we need to think about this because, last time when we chased that goblin dude into the tunnel, remember what happened? And they're all like, oh, yeah, right. But until that happens, they're all like, yep, well, he's still playing it out. So we can still catch this guy.
Yeah. So before we moved on, I wanted to touch on a couple of things for villains as well. So I think you have to do two things to consider, really. You're going to have your main villain, who's obviously in most campaigns, you're going to have one entity. It might be a council of evil people or whatever, but you're going to have this one thing that is, if they win at level 20, this is what they take down.
Sure.
But there's no reason why you can't have a multitude, a supporting cast, the
hierarchy of
yeah.
Yeah.
Batman's
when they beat the villain, they discover that the villain was actually working for someone above him, and now you just escalate it.
Yeah, I think Batman's rogues gallery type thing. You could have the Ra's al Ghul tiered through Bane and all of this kind of stuff, but equally you can throw in the Joker, who has got nothing to do with this other stuff, but he's just a joker and he's there to fuck with you. And I think there's space in any campaign for that kind of villain, and it's the NPC or the character who becomes a villain. You kind of got to take a little bit of a nugget from your players and how they respond to the situations. And it could have been that band of thieves you ambushed them with because you didn't really have an idea for the session, so they got attacked on the road.
Sure.
And like one of them got really badly injured and they stole all the stuff, and then they escaped. So that rogue, now your players are going to have it in for that person. That highwayman is going to become a villain, and he can start harassing them. And then maybe it wasn't a one-off chance encounter. Maybe there was a reason why he's trailing them, and you can pull from your characters' backstories and do all of these things and tie it together. Or maybe something that happened earlier on triggered these events. And you can do all of this after the fact. You don't have to have planned all of this out beforehand. Your players aren't going to know. They're going to think you're a genius storyteller. The guy when they had that bar fight at level 0, when they all met in that tavern, and the guy they smashed over the head who died was this guy's brother, and he's got a vendetta against him now, and and it does fall into that, the consequences of the player's actions and how what they do affects the world around them. And it isn't always going to be the villagers here now love them and sing their praises because they kill all the rats in the tavern basement. It leads on to, whilst good things happen when you do stuff, the bad people don't like it when you stop them being bad. So, your your fame going up in one category would lower it.
It's faction, it's reputation.
Yeah. As your reputation goes up with good villagers, it would go down with the bad villagers.
Yeah, and one of the, you hit it, one of the great villains is somebody who starts out, maybe not, but more on the player's side of the spectrum than on the other side, but something happens. And that player or that NPC starts to shift, right? And what was once an ally or a friend of the party, right? Now there's enmity between them.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing I would say, purely in D&D terms, be super careful. Clerics make terrible villains because ultimately when you get down to fighting them, they don't have the output to take on a party. You could make them be a vampire, or you could make them be a mummy, or have some sort of other capability, but just a straight up cleric, when you get to the final fight, proves to be particularly anticlimactic just because they get chugged up. You have to be super careful with magic users because, you have to play, they're your villain. You want to play them smartly. You don't want them to be dum-dums. So they're going to do everything they can to beat the players, and the spellcasters are potentially, you get the fireball, or disintegrate. And, there's just stuff like that the players aren't coming back from, that you've raised the ante above, it's when we talked about this. It's funny.
The beholder conversation we had.
Yeah. So you have a beholder, right? So you either run it the random thing where you just, for whatever reason, the beholder just decides to put people to sleep and paralyze them, right? Or, because you're just rolling randomly and he never gets to use any of his good eye stalks, and he never locks down the wizard or the cleric with the anti-magic eye, right? And stuff like that. Or you play it it's going to be incredibly tough. And that beholder just wrecks your party, right? And there's that type of thing. Yeah, a beholder played without the randomness that's just a campaign wrecker just waiting for a place to happen. And that's why I think the Forgotten Realms picked Xanathar to be their big Tony Soprano guy, right, in the Undermountain. from Xanathar's Guide, the big beholder with the goldfish. Yeah. So he's the super duper water deep villain. He's the big crime lord, right? So if you actually ever got to that guy and you decided that you were going to try to take him on, then that would end badly, right? It's like Strahd making. Strahd was bad. Is a tough fight for the players at the best of times, but then when they decided they were going to make him a wizard, that just made him exponentially. Like, I think a well-played Strahd is narrowly unbeatable.
Yeah.
Unless the players players are loaded with magic items or out-level him. But, I mean, he's got legendary actions and lair actions, and he's a vampire, and he's got access to spells. That, and if you play him smart, well, we're just going to take out the cleric first, so that the cleric can't start bringing back people in the combat, and then we're going to take out the heavy hitters. And we're not going to worry about the protection warrior or the rogue who needs somebody to be standing beside them, right? We'll just, paralyze the rogue and we use lots of crowd control abilities to take the sort of situational people out of the fight. And then we just, selectively annihilate the party.
Yeah.
And I mean, we saw that in Colville's party on party thing, right? Where he had them fight another party. That was the other party was higher level than them, had commensurate magic items and special abilities and all that stuff. So realistically, if it hadn't got into the sort of I call my god, you call your god resolution.
My dad's bigger than your dad.
That's right. Their party should have just got run over. Right? But the problem is when you make an encounter like that, you're setting yourself up, right? Because now all of our cards are on the table. There's no stepping back. The players, if they judge the wrong moment to retreat, right? So let's say, Phil goes around and cuts a bunch of people's head off. They win the encounter easily. Okay. But let's say that it goes the way it did in that game, and the players get behind, and the numbers are now not in their favor. And, right, the players, like you said, don't ever run away, right? Then the players just TPK'd.
Yeah.
And that's not where you wanted the game. This was not the point, right?
Yeah, but you don't have a villain to kill the entire party. Because if you want to kill a party, you can do it at any time, through any means you like.
Yeah. You can just have them run into a colony of purple worms.
Yeah. So what I wanted to touch on before we moved on from here was, in my opinion, one of the big things, and you spoke about this right at the start of this question, was that motive for a villain. And I think one of the problems you get is that cliche villain and the doing things. So I thought a really good thing to look at for this would be Game of Thrones. Whether you read the books or watch the series, I think it gives you the whole dichotomy of villains in Game of Thrones. You've got the cliche Joffrey, who nobody likes because he's
they're all villains.
Yeah, but everyone's got their own motives, and you hate people for different reasons. But I think a really good villain who you kind of understand, and is he a bad guy, would be someone like Tywin. Is a really good example of a higher level string pulling villain, and how that feeds into Roose Bolton and all of that kind of stuff, and Walder Frey and their manipulations. I think that's done really well. Whereas in Joffrey and the Mountain could be are more throwaway villains for me. They're never going to be that big, manipulating.
No, because they're predictable.
Yeah,
they're not. There's no thoughtfulness. There's no depth to them. They're one-dimensional. Right? Yeah. So if you get into a fight with the Mountain, you better bring bigger cannons than he's got, right? So you bring your spellcaster. Well, that's the end of the Mountain, because you just chew him down. But you know what you're facing. Whereas Tywin, that type of character, you know that he himself might not be particularly formidable. Like, he's going to be decent, but he is not going to take on the party by himself. He's not going to be, Superman or Hercules, where he puts the ring on and he just goes out there and smokes things. But just when you think of you've got him, he's hired some assassins or mercenaries or something like that. Or, he's a more cerebral villain. He's the one that is, pulling things out of the hat that catch the players off guard because they tend not to, predict those type of things.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good example in addition, though, that they show, like Game of Thrones shows that there's space for all of those types of villains within the same story. So I think that's why I wanted to bring that up. I think that's a really strong example of good writing of a villain and them being believable, but you get the full dichotomy of different types of villains and why they do what they do, and whether it's like.
And that's an important point, right? It's important to illustrate to your players what on the surface, what is motivating your villain.
Yeah.
Right? The players have to. If the players don't understand why the villain is doing what they're doing, that will turn into a very frustrating situation for your players, because they can't predict, they can't really plan because they don't really know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's something that over time, in your sort of long burn villain, right, that they have limited interaction with them. They run into a bunch of the sort of step minions, and those people maybe expose, maybe not 100% truthful, but they expose sort of the plan so that the players have an idea of what's going on, but you don't have to make it 100% truthful, right? By that particular minion's perspective, this is how it's, this is what's happening, right?
Yeah.
But
I think that's good. So then I was going to move on to Sean was asking about running mini campaigns as part of a larger campaign. I think we had a conversation kind of about this a few months ago now, or maybe a month or so ago, where I was saying about doing experience blocks with different characters. So I might run a campaign where someone was you take from level 1 to 5, and it shows this part of the story, and then take them from like levels 7 through 12, showing another part of the story. And whilst all of these campaigns are self-contained little mini blocks, the story that the players get to see overall would be a bigger campaign, and they're just not taking one character from A to B.
I think that the label for it is the troop, right? Yeah. Where you have different groups and they're doing different things. It's a Tom Clancy novel where you have Group A and they go do their thing. And then you have Group B and they go do their thing. And the players might not necessarily, be able to understand how they're linked. But as you script your story, the different groups all, start to like uncover different things, and you bring it all back to, if anyone's read a Tom Clancy novel, you understand what I mean, where he has like 5 stories. And they, the dude here and the dude on the other side of the spectrum, you have no idea how they're related, right? He starts off by telling you like a story of this or whatever, and you're like, I don't see where this is going, and how is he's related to this guy? But by the time you reach the end of your story, you've interwoven all these different things together, and that, that's really one of the games that might be interesting to do with is Fantasy Flight Star Wars, because you run, the edge of the Empire where they're playing rogues and scoundrels. You play some like Rebel stuff, right? You play some like Jedi stuff, and then they all sort of intermix. And this is something I did, I don't know, like I said, we're going back to Dragonlance, so it would have been a long time ago, like 25 years ago. I had 2 parties. Well, they started off as one party, and then when they got to the point where the party splits, I had them, we switched to a different night. And then we took the characters that went one way and the characters that went the other way. And then everybody that, made up a second set of characters, and they basically played in 2 parties, right? Yeah. And they continued their adventure in opposite directions, right? And it worked out quite well because the players never got bored. So they're not playing the same. Sometimes you reach a point with your character where it's just nothing seems to be really changing. It's kind of frustrating. You're like level 8, but you're waiting because your new feat comes at like level 10 or whatever, right? Yeah. And you're waiting for something, so you're just putting in time, and you're like, oh, this is kind of monotonous, but it'll pay off to me when I get to the point, whatever. Whereas that other character that you're playing, you're playing a cleric in the one game, you're playing a ranger in the other game. You get the best of both worlds, and everybody, even let's say if you alternated or whatever, yeah. that would be quite cool, because you would break up the sort of.
I think another approach I really like for this kind of idea is it lends itself well to like finite amount of time. Where if you're going to do something like school holidays, for example, on like breaks from school, or if you're going to have like people who work away, or there's loads of instances sure. where you have blocks of time, and you can write the mini campaign, so you have your resolution, and then it moves on. And I think it feeds well into, I think we discussed this on one of the earlier episodes where we're talking about different types of Star Trek, or like a good example might be like Stargate and stuff like that, where you're jumping through the Stargate here, and you do the thing on the end of the Stargate, but there's still a story waiting for you when you come back.
Yeah, but it's the Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Right, the time police type thing where you go off and you go to medieval England, you go to like ancient Egypt, you jump around. Rifts is another game like that where you can experience all these different things going on, right? The game itself facilitates the changing of genres on a regular basis.
Yeah. I think for me anyway, I don't think you need to worry about players keeping the same characters through all of that. I think playing different characters can lend itself to different experiences. I would be adverse to letting one player keep a character because other people might, you'd have to get a buy-in from all the players and sure. how it was going to work. But I don't think the players need to have their characters see the accumulation of all of the events. As long as you give them nice self-contained little stories and they feel resolved after each mini campaign, I think having that large campaign finish and the characters from the very first episode could be long dead. It could span centuries.
You could run them as NPCs.
Yeah.
Right? They could run into their own characters.
Yeah. Right? I mean, you could do some weird and wonderful stuff. You could have them play the villains for one part
sure.
of the mini campaign.
Sure. Yeah, you hit this on the head when you pointed it out. The shorter the game, the more likely that the players are going to get resolution. It's easier to script 2 or 3 sessions and have a resolution, right? And then run something else 2 or 3 sessions that could be totally, you'd be like, oh well, I like the way this went, but I think I want to try this. Okay, so we're going to do this, right? Like the interesting one, Call of Cthulhu. And I mean, we did this in the one, we played Call of Cthulhu by Gaslight, which is Victorian. We ran, I don't know, a couple months, and it resolved. And then we started a new game, but with the same sort of villain, not really a villain, but the same organization confronting the players. But now 30 years have passed. So at some point in the second game, they found these journals entries from one of the previous characters from the Cthulhu by Gaslight game that detailed all the things. So now the players could use their privileged knowledge from the first session in the second game, because now they had access to the diaries, right?
Yeah.
And one of the players had kept, intricate records, right? And then, that type of thing. And so you can have them connected. There's lots of, they could go and talk to one of the old players that's now in like an old folks home or something like that, right? And
a good one from that would be is it the Toombs episodes of X-Files?
Yeah,
where Victor wakes up after like 50 years or whatever the time span is, I can't remember. And Mulder's going talking to the people who tried to catch him last time, and that guy spoke to a person who tried to catch him the time before.
Right.
And we've got the newspaper clippings and stuff. And those things work really well for this kind of thing, where you can have that recurring villain, and you can do it. It would be another good example, I suppose.
Well,
Pennywise,
like Da Vinci Code, right?
Yeah.
Where like you have this organization over time, and the players interact with the timeline at various points and gather information, and then you reinterject them at a later point, right? And stuff like that. And you get to tell this massive epic story over the course of a century, or like 1,000 years or something like that, by having them put in different points along the timeline. And then, the final game. And as well, it's easier for you to manage if you're only designing 3 or 4 sessions.
Yeah.
Right? A finite beginning, a finite ending. But that's something, I think that is I don't want to group them, but more, not mature, but more experienced players will buy into something like that easier. Because they've probably played... They're like, I've played my character from 1 to like 12 or 15 or something like that, right? And they recognize the failings in the like long campaign, because that the long campaign is so much more work for the game master, right? It's super hard to keep everything going, and because like even like just talking about pacing, right, where you're trying to pace each session, and it gets tough, right, to find the right ups and downs in your meta story and all the other stuff, where that if you're running 3 or 4 sessions, the meta story exists. The players may briefly interact with it, but all you're really doing is managing the session play, and then it resolves itself, right?
I think for me, this kind of, and the reason I'm really fond of this kind of talk and like the idea of this, and I was really glad Sean brought it up, is because I think it really addresses one of those, like, I think it's a common problem of that frustration of your campaign peters out before you get that sense of resolution. And I think this is a really good way of addressing that.
For sure.
If you've got that core group of people, or you've got people who can only be reliable for finite amounts of time. And I mean, I've got a new baby. I feel the pressure sometimes that I don't know that I'm going to be available all the time. And I try to prioritize getting out to have those evenings to relax. But not everyone's as fortunate as I am to be able to do that. So it's loads of different concerns that people could have. And I think this could be the answer that people are looking for, that you don't need to plan that vast sprawling campaign. You can do those shorter sessions and then tie them together in different ways and still tell your grand stories and give the players that grand payoff, but in more manageable bite-sized chunks.
It also helps us. One of the biggest crises with game masters is they spend all this prep time at the front end preparing for their game, for their campaign, like world design, everything else. But so by the time they get to running the game, they're kind of burnt out, and they just started, right? And so it's hard for them to maintain quality of session and all these other things, right? There's lots of people that want to play a bunch of different games. They're playing, and then some other game comes out, and they're like, "Oh, I want to play this," right? It's frustrating for your players when, as much as it's frustrating for the players to have the game peter out and not see resolution, it's frustrating for the players to have the game master shut the game down when they were quite enjoying the game and move to some other thing because that's what the game master wants to do, right?
Yeah.
You want the arc to complete.
Yeah.
I think the game master owes the players to complete the arc, right? And so if you recognize in yourself that you're the type of game master who likes to jump around from different system to system. The butterfly.
Flower to flower.
If you're the butterfly, right, at least remember that the reason why the people are, they're playing your game, give them, like, as much as you may want to switch, let that arc. Craft a resolution to it, right? Or, like you said, where you know that that's who you are as a game master, then let's run, 4 sessions, 6 sessions. And I know that this is the finite beginning and the finite ending, right? And I know that when I'm done session 6, I'm going to then move to this game, and then I'm going to run 6 sessions of this game, right? You can always then, because honestly, let's say 6 sessions or 4 sessions or whatever you choose. By the time you've run that, you can be struggling for content, right? So
if just to break that down, even if we go with a small number, 4 sessions,
sure.
If you're looking at like 3 to 4 hours worth of play, 4 sessions, that's 12 hours worth of play. So you're looking at, like, on average for me, that's going to be like 40 hours worth of prep.
Yeah.
So like that's a full working week of prep for someone, which you're not going to do as a working week. So that's like, a month's worth of prep time for most people who are intensively prepping.
It's also nice if your group has a bunch of people that want to DM, because inevitably they play in a game, they're enjoying themselves. You, as the game master, inspire your players' imagination. They come up with ideas, and the issue is it becomes kind of a problematic, right? In that, like, if the one person's just running this open-ended campaign, everybody else wants to start running stuff, right?
Yeah,
because they're inspired, right?
So you end up competing against each other rather than working together.
That's right. Yeah, and that I don't think works out for anybody. So there is definite benefits. It's rare now, I would say, that you end up in a group where somebody had a DM.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the way it used to be. Everybody wanted to play. Everybody had a lot more fun playing than DMing, and there was always one person who ended up being the DM. Not necessarily by choice, but like if we wanted to play, somebody had to be the game master, right?
Yeah.
I think that's much less the case now. And so, I think as well, from purely a game master's perspective, it's interesting for me to see how you adjudicate things, that I can take what I think is best about what you did and implement it into my game. And everybody grows, players and game masters, by being exposed to.
100% agree.
Right? Yeah, I think that's awesome. So there's something to be said for that type of setup.
Yeah. We have one final question to cover off. This one was from Peter. He actually shot me a message on the Dice Hate Facebook, so you hadn't seen this one. And this one was enjoying the new spin-off show. So, it's its own thing. It's not a spin-off. We all love role-playing. It's not a spin-off from the X-Wing show. And he was asking about... So he says that he plays 4th Ed and 5th Ed, but with his group wanted to try something different, and they were thinking about a post-apocalyptic system. So, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'll be honest and upfront, I've not really looked at much post-apocalyptic role-playing. I get my fix from computer games for that kind of gameplay. It's just not something I've explored as of yet. I think I can't remember the book now. The closest system would have probably been some of the Dark Heresy stuff I planned was at the industrial side of the 41st millennium, which is relatively post-apocalyptic, but that's the closest I've been to that kind of gameplay.
I think so. I think it depends on what type of game. D&D might not be the game that's best suited for post-apocalyptic, but you absolutely could run like a Book of Eli type setting with D&D.
Yeah.
Technology's lost. Everybody's sort of, crossbows and bows and knives and swords. It's sort of, gone back to that. You're just playing And instead of, but I mean, you're removing clerics probably. You're removing wizards probably, right? Your like most of your sort of spellcasters, your rogues and there'll be probably no rangers. Well, there might be a ranger, but they won't have spells. There might be a paladin, but they might not have spells. But so they effectively are just So that's why I say D&D might not be the best game for that, right? But there's like lots of those style of games. Also depends, if you want to use firearms, that's something you might want to look at, a system that is much more suited to that type of thing. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I know lots of the old, like Twilight 2000, which was the old GDW game where you were soldiers at the end of the Third World War type thing, sort of stranded in like nuked out Europe. Had awesome weapon combat system, just amazing weapon combat system. That was super well done. You could do that. One of the interesting ones is a super old game that we used to play that we used Twilight 2000 to run, but was a game called Moral Project, which was this billionaire or trillionaire industrialist sets up this organization to repopulate the world after the so-called, Third World War type thing. And he trains all these different teams. He puts away like seed sample sellers and stuff like that. So he's got all these plans for repopulating the Earth. And then when the nuclear exchange sets off, the first missile hits the command thing and screws up all the computers and never wakes up the teams. So the teams just sort of, as the machinery starts to fail in their bunkers, they start to wake up at random intervals, right? And they don't know how long they've been in cryogenic sleep, and they sort of just pop out, and then you can have whatever setting you want.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I was thinking about it while you were talking. I think were I to want to run using D&D. So post-apocalyptic is a wide open thing. So as long as there's been an apocalypse, if you're after that, it's okay. So if I wanted to keep all of the classes and run it as straight up D&D, I think I would run something along the lines of Secret of Mana or the old Final Fantasy style settings where you have all of the D&D stuff, but you're in a world that's after an advanced civilization. And, that's ancient past. And I think that's how I'd try and pull it off if I wanted to go post-apocalyptic. So I'd still have the nuclear desert style environment.
Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, but I don't know that you need to go full-on Fallout style gameplay for it to be post-apocalyptic. But again, it depends on the flavour of game you're going for. If my players wanted to play Fallout, I probably wouldn't run it using 5e.
That's right. No, there's lots of better systems, right? That you like, even Call of Cthulhu, because they have modern. So there's firearm rules and stuff like that. There's lots of excellent systems. It give you the opportunity to explore alternative systems that you might turn out that you'd be like, hey, I really like Call of Cthulhu's percentage-based system, right?
Yeah.
But I think D&D's strength is swords. So I was going to say swords and sorcery, but
no, I know what you mean. I think a good way around the wizard thing as well, if you want to run post-apocalyptic, would be you change the components. I can't remember. I think you spoke about a module from this where it's actually a crash. Was it Pathfinder that has the spaceship?
It's S3, Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, where you find the ship and there's like robots and there's weapons and stuff like that. It's like
magic doors and
sure.
I remember the Albion campaign for Warhammer. They did it there where you found this like thing that shot flame, like a dragon's breath gun. It was a flamethrower. You got this gauntlet of power. It was a power fist. You got this suit of armor, which made you really strong. It was power armor.
Well, it's like you were talking about Raymond Feist, right?
Yeah.
And so in his D&D game, the game master wanted to have those like cool people that come through the portal that raid the coast and stuff like that. Well, so that was the game master's other one, running Tecumel, right? The Empire of the Petal Throne, which is a post-apocalyptic setting, but all the magic is technology.
Yeah, and that's it. You change the components to be technology-based stuff. So to cast a fireball, you need this thing, but it's not.
It's like magic in the 40K universe, right?
Yeah,
that type of thing where the priests in that are the dudes who worship the machines. They're not really priests, right? They're worshiping technology and so forth, and so lots of interesting stuff that you can do with it. But it also is a great vehicle to maybe convince your group to try something different, because groups, people are intendedly resistant to change. And they'd be like, I'm never playing that, until they play it. And they're like, that was pretty cool. And leading back to the previous discussion, if they know they're only going to play 3 or 4 sessions, right, then they're more willing to stick their toes in the water, because they know that after a month or however long your game lasts, that they're going to be then able to, suggest, hey, let's go back to this, or go do this, or whatever. And then in every time that I've ever done that sort of system switch, players were super resistant. And then they were all like, well, that was a lot more fun. And then like later on, they were all like, hey, can we go back to playing this again? Because this was kind of cool. That Call of Cthulhu, I thought it would be stupid, but it turned out to be really cool. Now I want to kind of play it again, right? And you just have to be smart as the game master. Pick the right system. The one thing I will caution people, since like we work in the retail side of things, that flip-flopping between games can get quite expensive for your group.
Yeah. It's a good idea to vary who's DMing and spreading the cost. If you're not going to vary who's DMing, all chip in. Don't be that guy who turns up and all you'll buy is the dice you need for that system.
Yeah. Or, everybody put together and buy a copy of the PDF and go to Staples and put together what the players need to play in the game, and then stash it so that if you decide to go back at some point, right, that you can just whip out your PDFs. And I think, it doesn't take very much to convince players, if they're having fun, to, save up their money and buy into it. But if you're flip-flopping games like every month, you're going to have a plan for how you're going to deal with that, right?
Yeah. No, I think that finishes that one up relatively well. I think you covered some decent extra source material there as well. Like I said, I don't think it all has to be Mad Max Planet of the Apes. You had like Book of Eli in there. I think it's a really cool story-driven setting, like the kind of Wild West feel and the religion being the big...
Stephen King's Dark Tower, all sorts of cool stuff like that, right? Yeah. And there's so much of that material out there that, if you were going to run something like that, man, you've just got a ridiculous amount of source material to draw from.
Yeah. So I think we can wrap it up there. We're at about an hour and 15 minutes for a video, which when I edit for the podcast version normally comes out to about an hour. So I think that's a good time frame. We're managing to stick to fairly well. I did want to put out another question. So I really want to do one of these sharks. So do we have any of the sharks left in the store?
There might be.
Okay. So I want to paint one of the sharks. So we might give one of the sharks away. So I thought what we could do is we could have the question. I'll post it on the Facebook page for Dice 8 now, and that can be the way to win a shark. But I thought maybe we could do the coolest villain you've either ran or played against in a campaign.
Well, that's kind of a cool idea. Let me check one thing. Just one sec.
Yeah. He's rummaging. He's rummaging.
Look at this. Oh, there we go.
Oh yeah, the shark. But there we go. Yeah, that's the one. That's the WizKid shark.
It's awesome. It's got a bunch of like fins in the water as well. That go with it. Yeah, it's a phenomenal. That and the octopus I thought were just awesome.
Yeah, so I'll grab one just to paint because I want to paint it. So I'll try and show that off on my Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram's Kris. I post pictures of all my crap I've been painting.
I might have to get you to paint me a tiger shark that can like chew people's arms off and stuff like that. That would be epic.
Yeah, and then if you win, so tell us about the best villain you've either ran or played against. Doesn't have to be in D&D, it can be in any system, but why they were the best villain, what made them interesting, and like that showdown encounter type thing. And we'll pick one on the next episode, and I'm going to post that on the Dice Hate Facebook page as soon as we've finished recording this. But that is it for me. I've got nothing else, I suppose. You can say Dice Hate Facebook page. If you're listening to us on the SoundCloud, we're also on YouTube, on Dice Hate on YouTube. If you've got any other ideas for topics, make sure you get in touch and let us know. Any questions for either of us. Even if you just want to chat, you can join us on Discord. We've had a few more people signing up on there, and I'll make sure there's a link to the Discord server in the show notes as well. Yeah, have you got anything else to add, Greg? You still enjoying it? 6 episodes in.
6 episodes in. Wow,
that's like 12 weeks of your life I've soaked up with talking about D&D.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No comment. No comments. That pales in comparison to 40 years worth of D&D stories at the store. So yeah, I think we're doing good.
Yeah, we've only recorded 12 weeks worth of your 40 years of chatting about D&D.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, man. Thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate it. We'll see you in 2 weeks.